Hi, welcome to Adweek Together. It is Thursday, April 2nd. I am Josh Sternberg, the media and tech editor at Adweek. I am joined today with Minda Smiley, our agency's reporter. Good afternoon, Minda.
Hi, how are you, Josh?
I'm doing okay. Where are you hunkering down at these days?
Still in New York.
Okay, and I'm out in the wonderful burbs of Jersey.
Yep.
Thank you for joining us today. Well, we're going to dive right in and talk about the state of agencies. Earlier this week, WPP had a pretty big report. Just kind of wanted you to walk through us. What's happening in agency land? There's a lot of shuffling happening, from personnel to budgets to the ways that we're operating. What's the latest?
Yeah, it's kind of been wild to see how quickly things have kind of changed. I feel like, at the beginning of March, it was all about how these agencies are going to transition to working from home, who's doing it right, who's doing it wrong, who maybe waited a little too long to implement a real work from home policy. But now, obviously, that seems like it was years ago, and now everyone's focused on layoffs and furloughs and sort of how agencies are kind of cost cutting and managing everything going on right now. And I think WPP was really the first holding company to come out with, publicly at least, with a big plan as to how they're kind of going about doing some of this. I think, from my perspective at least, everything they're doing seems to make sense. Nothing too crazy in there, but I think sort of what has a lot of the industry talking is the fact that they kind of said they're cutting award costs. They didn't go into much detail about what that exactly means, but I think we can all assume, this is going to, for an industry that loves awards and has many awards and has many companies that are supported by the fees that come from awards. It's definitely going to be an interesting year to see how it all kind of plays out.
So the state of agencies for a number of years now has been, let's call it, crazy. How has the impact of the coronavirus on budgets been playing out in agency land the last few weeks?
Well, I think, sort of what I've been hearing talking to people is that I think cash flow is always an issue, and I think it kind of sets off this almost domino effect when, like, if the client starts to try to change payments or extend payments or kind of stay quiet on payments, then the agency doesn't have the money they might need, and then that affects their vendors and the publishers, and so it's sort of this whole crazy line of people that are impacted by this, and I have heard from talking to sources that's a huge pain point right now. I think I was talking to someone that said he had heard clients are trying to extend payment terms by, I think, 60 days right now, which has to be really tough, especially for smaller agencies. And so yeah, I think that's payment terms have always been an issue in the industry. I think clients. Research recently came out saying that they are getting longer, and so to have this coronavirus pandemic, just kind of piling on top of that, I think it's been really tough. So
yeah, you wrote about how 37% of marketers are now lengthening their payment terms, and the average payment is now around 58 days, which is up, I don't know, from like 20 some odd from the earlier part in
5 years ago. Yeah.
So as the economics continue to change, where do you hear on the creative side, how is that having an impact? Are we going to start to see different types of creative over the coming weeks, months, years, however long this takes?
Yeah, that's something that's a really good question, and I think, like, frankly, I haven't heard a ton about that, and I think that maybe points to the fact that I think agencies are still kind of trying to figure a lot of that out. I mean, we've seen some of the initial stuff, like I wrote about how agencies are kind of grappling with the fact that they can't go on live shoots anymore, and so now they're sort of using stock footage and user-generated content, and they're finding a lot of ways to sort of, they are finding a lot of ways to sort of make the work, but it's kind of this like weird twofold issue where it's like they have to change the way they're making the work, but they also have to change the messaging, because a lot of stuff just seems really tone deaf and irrelevant right now. And so I think the brands are getting new messaging out, and the agencies are working with them, but a lot of it does feel kind of like reactive and sort of quick. I don't think we've really gotten to the point where like people have had enough time to really deal with process all of this and come out with like truly sort of really different creative. It seems, I think we're still in the early stages of it, if that kind of makes sense.
It does. And as we are, streaming this on a whole slew of platforms, we're monitoring what's happening on LinkedIn. So if anyone is watching on LinkedIn that has any questions for Minda around this, or even has any thoughts on how your agency is handling this, let us know, and we can kind of talk about it as we're trying to figure this thing out. So one thing that you just mentioned that I thought was really interesting was the idea that creatives are going to be leaning into stock creative more often in the foreseeable future. So that works pretty well for print in some respects, and that works a little bit better in digital for display ads and other senses. How does that work for TV spots?
Yeah, I mean, I think from what I've seen, a lot of it is animation, like people just kind of really going back to that, and I think a lot of the ads I've seen, at least so far, have been animation heavy more than anything, like more than stock even, and so I think and that does work for TV, but I do wonder like how, for some of the campaigns, and especially as we kind of evolve, and like I said, as some of this more reactive messaging around what's happening right now sort of changes, and we kind of have to get almost like live in this new world where, maybe things aren't so imminent, but like we're still dealing with the fallout of everything. I do wonder sort of how, if we are still working from home and whatnot, how that could sort of impact it. So
do you think that, out over the last decade, as the rise of the digital shops spiked and then kind of collapsed over the last couple of years, do you think that we're going to see more, let's call them independent solo practitioner, or maybe less jargony freelancers, pick up the reins on some of these creative accounts where they can just bang stuff out pretty quickly and effectively for clients in ways that maybe some of the lumbering shops can't, because they're all working remotely?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I actually was just thinking about that this morning. I think initially and still, I think freelancers have been really impacted by this, because I think in a lot of cases they maybe were the first to get cut, or maybe the first to struggle to find their next gig. But I do think at the same time, like, I kind of want to start looking into the long-term impact of like, okay, so these agencies are going through layoffs and furloughs and whatnot, and then. But I do wonder, 6 months from now, a year from now, when these agencies are kind of maybe, some of them might be kind of bare bones, like, will freelancers really have an opportunity to jump in and sort of take advantage of that most? And also, like you said, now that we're living in this new world, I guess, where working from home, we're kind of proving every day that it can be done, and it can be effective. That could also work in their favor. So I think it'll be really interesting to watch that space, because I think even before all of this hit, freelancers were I think because industry is moving to project-based work and less of this like AOR model. I think freelancers are being able to jump in and jump out of projects and kind of get gigs lined up. And so I do wonder, like, I think right now it's really hard for them, but I wonder in the long run how this might change how they work. So
what are you hearing in the relationship between creative agencies and media agencies as everyone's kind of working remotely now? Are they coming together a little bit more often to have better communication, or are they still kind of more siloed and everyone's kind of just running around without their heads on?
that's a good question. That actually is something I kind of want to look into. I mean, I think it depends a lot on the agency. We do have some agencies that still, full service, as they say, and some that are not. I would imagine. I mean, just from what I know and what I've heard, I would imagine that they almost have to be working more closely together right now, just because. Brands have had to change the way they advertise, change their messaging. I know out of home obviously has taken a huge hit and has had to pivot. So I think the creative has to change its messaging, but where you're advertising also has to change. And so I would think they have to be talking.
Yeah, we're hearing on the media side as well that the conversations between media agencies and publishers and creative agencies and publishers and doing custom work has really kind of stepped up, that the efficiencies of being able just to hop on a video call because, hey, where else are you going to be right now, right?
Yeah.
Of course, that comes with a double-sided challenge, right? Well, now I'm always going to be on.
Yeah.
And it's you were talking about payments before, and as I'm thinking this thing a little bit through, I'm also, our colleague Ronan Shields, who's our programmatic editor, wrote a story earlier this week. I think it was earlier this week. Could have been last week. I don't know. Days are all kind of the same. That media companies are also having issues with payments, and you kind of danced around it, but there's this supply chain of media where it starts with the brand. They have the idea, they push it out to the agency so that the agency can then distribute that across media and platforms, and then the publishers are at the bottom of the hill with their hat in hand asking, hey, can you pay us a little bit for it? But now all of those payments are also getting delayed. And I'm we're talking about a lot of things here. I'm kind of curious where the communication, whether it's through video or Slack or even a phone call, how that is getting better. Are you hearing from sources that it's like, well, maybe now is the time to actually start reaching out to people a little bit more?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot actually. I can't tell you how many times I've heard like some variation of communication is key this past week, because I have been sort of trying to figure out how agencies are being affected by late payments, missing payments, and I think it's sort of like I was saying before. I think it's kind of like it's the problem that's been going on for a long time. I mean, agency, it's never fun to call your client and be like, hey, we need the money. Like, I think it's always kind of an awkward conversation. And I think that hasn't changed right now. But I think at the same time, like to your point, kind of like, it is kind of like, okay, well, this is happening. Like, it's kind of like the elephant in the room. I think a lot of agencies are kind of taking that opportunity to be like, we just need to talk to them and tell them what's going on and be super upfront about what we need right now. And I think from what I'm hearing is that a lot of people are saying like marketers need to do the same. They need to like get out in front of this and be proactive and figure out a plan, even if it's something like, making we'll maybe pay you less, but we'll make sure we pay you now as opposed to paying you, 3 months from now, or just figuring out some sort of plan that probably isn't going to be ideal for either party, but is at least getting them talking and getting the issues on the table. Because I just think, it is an age-old problem, and it's only getting worse right now. And most agency people I've talked to have at least said like communication is just the biggest thing right now. Like, we just need to tell our clients what's going on, and yeah.
Well, and you mentioned, like one possible solution is, pay less now, pay more later, have some kind of tiered or scaling plan. And, obviously we're seeing that on the media side from layoffs and furloughs, that instead of just completely slashing divisions, media companies are instituting a different type of fee where they will say, all right, anyone making over X amount of money is going to get a Y% pay cut, or we are going to furlough this division and they're not going to get paid 1 week, like Gannett, right? 1 week for every month for the next 3 months, people aren't going to get paid. And this is a way to signal that we think that this is going to be a short-term challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Taking all of this, what are you hearing on the agency side as far as staffing and how, again, in that supply chain, if the clients are not paying, how are the agencies then dealing with any potential layoffs or furloughs or just sitting on the bench?
I think it's kind of similar to the publishing side in the sense that I think they're trying to do furloughs when they can, because I think there is, I think that's sort of maybe a more optimistic look of like, this will end soon. I know it sucks. And I think some people, I actually need to get a clear answer on this, but I think you can still get your health insurance when you're furloughed, which I think is a big, something employers are trying to do right now. I would say overall, it's been a mix of layoffs and furloughs at agencies. I do think, I do wonder though, like even a week from now, like we've seen how quickly things have moved. Like if they're going to have to just let those employees go, I have no idea. I think things are changing so quickly. But yeah, definitely furloughs have been happening across the board. But I do think that I think it's, I was talking to an agency, a head of an agency the other day that was saying that, he had to do layoffs, and it was really, really hard because he knows that by laying the employees off, he's getting rid of their health insurance. And that's something horrible to deal with right now.
Yeah.
And so I think that could maybe be part of why. I don't know. I think it's probably a mixture, but like I said, that this could all change by next week. So I don't know.
Do you see any potential mergers or any of the holding companies picking up some more of the smaller companies, any of the smaller companies consolidating into their own little bit larger firms? The M&A space on the media side, for example, is I'm starting to hear is picking up a lot, whether it's on the ad tech side or even on the publisher side. So I was just wondering if there's an analogy on the agency side rather, that with all of the challenges beset in the industry over the last decade, will this now spur maybe counterintuitively some business deals?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think, it's funny because we've already seen that happening before this happened. Like, I mean, I think like everyone kind of thinks of WPP right now. Like they obviously have merged a lot of their agencies together. But I guess, I mean, that is a good point. I could see that happening. I could even see like a lot of, some of these independent agencies that maybe are able to weather this, that are maybe a little bit bigger. Maybe if they were beforehand, they might have been hesitant or resistant to being bought, whereas now maybe after going through this, they might have a change of heart. So I think we could see some of that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really tough to be sort of in that like middle ground right now of like a independent agency that's maybe usually is able to do pretty well. Maybe even I think maybe they're even struggling a little more than like the really small shops that maybe do only have like 10 or fewer people that are maybe kind of able to make quicker changes and kind of pivot through this. And so yeah, I think after this we will. I can't really say now how that landscape will change in terms of like mergers and whatnot, but I do think we'll see something, because I just think this has been too big to not see some of that, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And like there's it's weird because like the uncertainty throughout the whole entire literally world, right? Like how often do we actually get to say that? Is really, it hangs over all of us, right? Like this giant sort of Damocles is just swinging above us, and we're all just kind of trying to make sure that we don't get nicked. And one thing that I think is also kind of interesting along those lines is how this is forcing us to change our processes, right? just the fact that you and I are doing this live stream, we would not have done this a month ago under normal circumstances.
Yeah.
On the creative side, we've seen in the past where crisis has forced the industry to make certain types of decisions, right? So in 2008, during the financial crisis, publishers essentially lowered their standards for ad creative on display ads. And that really ushered in the age of the belly fat ads and the gopher ads and the really just the toenail fungus ads and just all of like the bottom of the barrel stuff. And our colleague Andrew Bluestein, again, earlier this week, last week, who can say, wrote a story about how we might be playing, deja vu all over again these days, because publishers need money. And when creatives are not able to go out and spend their clients $5 million, $10 million budgets to create these beautiful ads, we're getting not great stuff.
Yeah.
Have you heard of this happening on the creative side just yet?
Not just yet. I mean, I think even if there have been conversations around it, or if it is happening, like people they just don't want to admit it yet, or they're trying to grapple with it. I do feel like because this has happened quickly, and I mean, I think there is this sort of almost, at least from what people tell me, there's like, oh, it's a creative challenge to have to do things differently now, and we're figuring it out, and oh, it might stink that we can't travel the world and go on this shoot now that we'd planned, but like we're now doing this really fun animation project. So I do feel like there's a sense of I don't know, maybe like kind of like how when this all first started, I think people were kind of it's a lot of change, and and with change there can be some good, and I think maybe that's what they are kind of focusing on now. But I mean, I don't know how long that will last, and I don't know, as clients' budgets kind of change every day, and clients kind of keep, companies keep changing how much they even want to allocate to advertising right now, or where they want to allocate advertising. I do think we could see a return to some of that, because I just think, I don't know, it almost seems inevitable in a way.
Yeah, I mean, look, and I'm curious to see what happens to the Tabulas and Outbrains of the world, where they use a lot of that.
Yeah.
Let's call it exotic imagery.
Exotic.
Well, I want to thank you, Minda, for joining us. It looks like we're kind of running out of time here, but again, appreciate you taking the time to chat with us and Adweek Together. On tomorrow's episode, our executive editor, Stephanie Patrick, will be talking with Lisa Lacey, our Amazon retailer, big box store reporter who covers everything in retail, talking about how the coronavirus is impacting that segment of the world. I thank you all for joining us, and be well, be safe, be smart. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thanks.